Hello everyone, I'm day weather meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update for this Saturday, January 29th, 2022. It's being brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors, as well as WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. Well, we've certainly heard and have been watching a lot of bad weather in the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the East Coast, lots of winter weather on the eastern side of the U.S., while the western United States has had a drier trend in some locations, but the weather hasn't been as stormy. But that's going to change. We've already seen recently a couple of systems move on through, and there's more coming. Basically, as we go through this weekend and through Monday, most of the western United States will have a generally mild and quiet weather pattern. However, right as we leave January and right as we start February, a transition to colder temperatures and increasing snow chances will be taking place by the middle of next week. And this could be quite a change in the western U.S. to a much colder weather pattern. There's going to be some snow as well, but I think the most noticeable aspect of this weather pattern change as we enter February will be a more persistent cold. Livestock interests should prepare for a cold start to February, as we are getting some signals that the first half of February in particular could have some pretty cold weather at times. Certainly sub-zero temperatures are on the table. And all we got to do is remember about last year. Last February of 2021 was a very cold pattern for the central and western United States. And there's some aspects of this pattern change that look similar to what happened a year ago. So you're going to want to watch the weather carefully and be prepared for, more often than not, colder weather that's coming. Let's take a look back at the past week, and we have had some western precipitation, in particular, some really good precipitation in a small area of eastern Colorado and western Kansas. In east central Colorado, where it's really dry, well over an inch of water, with some areas up to 1 to 2 feet of snow in this isolated pocket right here. Across the rest of the western United States, the Pacific Northwest continues to get wet, some of the interior areas of the northern Rockies, some of the Great Basin states, and into some parts of the Northwest, a little bit of precipitation. But if you were to look at least the comparison of what's fallen over the last week to what the normal conditions are, only in these areas here do we see some patches of green where precipitation's been a little bit above average, and that's mainly in western Kansas and parts of Colorado. Good for them. But you can see we've really seen a drier pattern in California and the Great Basin states, and I think for another week that's going to continue. Even though the trend's going to get colder, the better snows are going to be along and near the Continental Divide, the mountains, and points to the east. The drought monitor sort of reflecting where we've been for quite a while. Now, this drought monitor does not include the storm that hit eastern Colorado. So on the next drought monitor map, we should be able to show you some improvement of that red and brown area there. And we continue to see the most severe drought conditions across Montana, central and eastern Oregon, and then here in the southern plains and southern Rockies, and of course here in the Great Basin. I do see help on the way for all of these areas later as we get into February and as we head on into March. The change in drought status only really shows negative changes here in the yellow areas over the last week, and only some very modest improvements here in north central Montana. Now let's take a look at how the weather is going to unfold. There's a lot of moving parts to the weather pattern. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the concentration of the most harsh winter weather has been in the central and eastern areas of the United States. And through this upcoming weekend and through Monday, that's how it's going to be. There's going to be another big storm along the eastern seaboard here, affecting parts of the mid-Atlantic and the northeastern United States, with the Arctic air being directed into the east. The southeastern United States, freezing temperatures will happen in Florida this weekend, while the mild area of high pressure builds here in the west. We do have a low off the coast of California here that'll produce some showers and wind, but it won't do much. But what we're going to see in a week's time frame, from where we are now to next Saturday, is a migration of this colder, stormy weather pattern that's in the east, and have it be more directed towards the central and western United States. And there we see it. This is by next Saturday. High pressure builds strongly up into the Gulf of Alaska and the eastern Pacific. And what that does is that causes a big dip in the jet stream. Then we have another high up here into the northern Atlantic. What ends up happening is the cold air gets all bottled up here over Canada and the North American continent into the lower 48 states. And these blue arrows here represent Arctic air surges that will have no blockage to come into the central and western United States. Basically, it's like opening the door to the freezer. And what will happen is, with the door open and the jet stream riding high and building up in the eastern Pacific, cold air will spill into the central and western U.S. And there's Arctic air, lots of it, that will have easy access into the Rockies and the central and northern high plains, as well as some very cold air getting all the way to the Gulf Coast. Sound familiar? We saw this last February. So we want to really point out that there's a transition that'll be taking place towards a colder, more stormy pattern in the west, but especially with the cold. Now, this is by this next Thursday, the 3rd of February. All these purple areas show where temperatures will be 30 degrees or more below the 30-year averages. So you're talking about some really, really cold air in this portion of the North American continent here, all the way to California. It's going to get cold. And this is where you're going to see some sub-zero temperatures and the potential for sub-zero wind chills. That's why livestock interests need to be prepared for this transition to colder weather. Now, over the next week, precipitation looks like this. We'll see another round of some snow in this area here as we get into the early to middle portions of next week, and continued wet conditions in parts of the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies. Most of California and the Great Basin areas, though, still, at least initially, while it will get colder with that cold air coming in like this, we still don't have a lot of precipitation. Hopefully that'll change in about a week from now. When you look at snowfall, that matches up well. Look how far south the snowfall potential gets in the next week with that Arctic intrusion coming on in. These are the next 7 days, the average temperatures compared to averages. Look at all the blue and the green. Most of the lower 48 states, most of Canada, but you can see all the green here in the blue in the west. These are temperatures that are going to be colder than the 30-year normals over the next 7-10 days or so, and this could extend well into the second week of February as well. Our next update will be next Saturday, the 5th of February. Stay warm and have a good week ahead.